Subhaga Crystal Bacon, and I am a Met-Hal Arts teaching artist and a local poet. And I'm here today to talk to you about writing a particular kind of poem that's very easy to do, even if you have no experience writing poems before. It's something called a found poem, and particularly it's called an erasure poem. So we call it a found poem because it means we found part of the words that we're going to use in another text. And then the process we're going to go through today is I'm going to tell you a little bit about erasure poems, how they're made, and then I'll have you go off and work on a poem of your own, and then we'll come back together and I'll share with you what I wrote using the erasure poem process. Okay, so this kind of poem is called an erasure poem. Everybody knows what an eraser is. And so we're going to find a piece of text that you're interested in, that you're curious about, and then you're going to read through that text, and with a pen or a pencil, you're just going to mark out all the words that you don't want to include in your poem. So you're sort of erasing those. And you can just go through and put little brackets around them or however you like to do it. Making sure that what you're leaving behind are the really important words. So what you'll notice when you're doing this poem is you can either write something that's completely off the topic of the original piece. You can change the perspective or the opinion that's in the original piece, or you can make something totally new. So that's the fun with an erasure poem, is finding the words that really leap out at you and erasing everything else around them. And you're usually looking for words that are going to be things, right? Nouns that will show us things, or verbs that will tell us, how things are done, that show some action. Okay, so we're going to take a brief pause while you go and gather your materials. So your materials for this activity are going to be any piece of writing that you're interested in or curious about. Usually I recommend a newspaper or a magazine, or I have the Met-Hal Arts magazine here. You can even use an advertising flyer or catalog. Just make sure that anything you're going to use, that it's okay for you to make marks in it. Maybe your parents have old books that they're not using anymore. Those are also great texts, but you want to make sure that the writing is something that you can make marks in. Okay, so you're going to need to gather something to draw your words from, and you're going to need a pen or pencil and some paper. Okay. So I'm going to show my first example today from a poem that I've actually already completed from this old copy of the Met-Hal Valley News. It's from the middle of September. So let's take a look at what's below the fold. I was really interested in schools reopening and wondering what that was like. So I read the article, and right from the very beginning, I found some words that really caught my attention. So the way I chose to do this was I used my pen and I put brackets around the words that I didn't think were so interesting. So as I was reading, I thought, 181 days, that's interesting. Schools pulsed, that's interesting. Unusual, that's true. Mix of. Person, remote. So I started finding the words that really seemed to tell me something about what it was like to start back to school during COVID. So I marked off the words that I wasn't interested in. Now, something that's really fun about using a newspaper article is that a newspaper is written in what's called column inches, so it's really skinny. So when you write it out, you can make it really narrow on the page if you like. Now, what I did was something a little different. I typed mine up on the computer. So in this one, which I called Met-Hal Valley Schools Finally Reopen with Smiles and Tears, and Erasure, I just took the title of the article, but I wanted to give my readers a clue why the words were all over the page, so I made sure to label that it was an erasure. So here are the words I picked out. 181 days, schools pulsed, and then unusual, mix of, person, remote, kindergarten, started. So the reason I left all this space here was to show, just to sort of approximately how much space was in between the words that I left out. So from these words that I've selected from the newspaper article, I now have this kind of interesting poem. 181 days, schools pulsed, unusual, mix of, person, remote, kindergarten started, buildings, home. It's good, it's unique, lots of smiles, even tears. So the way a poem tries to really condense something, a story or an idea, by pulling out just a few words from this article, I've condensed the experience of going back to school during COVID and just captured the feeling that I thought it might have for students going back. So that's what an erasure looks like. Now would be a good time for you to find a piece of writing that you like and go through the process of picking out your words by putting brackets or putting a line through. You want to be careful if you put a line through because you might change your mind and have to go back and add a word. So you still want to be able to read it. And then write out your poem, and I'll work on another one too, and then we'll come back and I'll share my finished product and you'll have yours. Okay, back so soon. I really wish I could hear or read what you've written, and I hope that you'll share it with your friends and family, at least with your mom and or your dad or your pet. Somebody should hear what you found and what you turned into a poem out of today's activity, because poems really are written to be heard and to be read. So I'll show you what I came up with today, and I want to point something out to you. So I used the Met-How Arts magazine, and I picked just a small piece. So really what you work with can be just a paragraph. The longer the piece of writing that you're working from, the more words you have and the more writing that you'll do. But this will give you at least an idea of a short piece of erasure that I took from just a paragraph about Sarah Ashford, who was featured in Met-How Arts magazine. Okay, so here's the erasure poem that I wrote just on this one paragraph about Sarah Ashford. Since it was about reopening her studio after COVID, I was looking for something that would make a little bit of a light poem and not too serious. Featured artist update, Sarah Ashford, an erasure poem from the Met-How Arts magazine. Sunny, studio after lockdown, felt like coming home. Age, health, husband, artist, Ashford disciplined. It felt weird. Even driving the car was a little freaky. So you'll notice I put these lines in italics because those are direct quotes from Sarah in the article. But if you're writing this out by hand, you can just put quotation marks around those parts, and that will just be great. That'll work just as well. And that's an erasure poem from a short piece of writing. I've taken it and made it my own. But we always give credit to where it came from, because the poem wouldn't exist without this wonderful article about Sarah that was in the Met-How Arts magazine. So if you want to do this on a computer and you spend some time on the internet reading fun stuff like National Geographic, I get in my mailbox, so it's really easy to keep up with what they're talking about. It's really fun to do this activity on your computer because you can get a better sense of erasing things from the text. So I always usually copy right down from the title, but I don't want to have to delete that picture. So I'm just going to select the text of this article, and then I'm going to open a word processing document. I use Microsoft Word, and I'm going to paste it in. So that's pretty easy and quick. Now here's the fun part. So you read this and you think, what's the interesting information in this essay. One of my neighbors leaves out birdseed early each day, so when I pass, there's usually half a dozen squirrels. So if I decide what I want to get rid of, all I have to do is come up here to the font color on my taskbar. It's going to maybe be a little different depending on what program you use. And I select white as my font color. And then I use that to erase what I don't want to be there anymore. So I've selected this phrase one of, and then I change the font white, and it's gone. Instead of deleting it, and then I wouldn't have an erasure because it would move the lines over on the page. So a lot of times, even when we draft a poem that we're writing from our own imagination and creativity, we have to go back and take out the words that are not very important to the rest of the poem. And so we can see where that's starting to unfold here. My neighbor's birdseed, I pass by, morning, half a dozen squirrels, starlings, a handful of morning, countless sparrows, black-capped finches vying for spread. So now what happens is we get this fun internal rhyme between morning as a time of day and mourning as a kind of grief. Now here it was the name of a bird, but I like having a handful of morning, or it's a handful of morning, countless sparrows, black-capped finches vying for spread. And so you just go through and figure out what parts you want to remove, and then you're left with this sort of interesting looking poem that has a lot of space in it, and it's kind of writing itself. And it's very important then, if you're going to save this poem, I come back and say, capture the title. Well, it's not going to let me copy it because it's a link. Everyone can watch the birds. And then I add that in. So that's how you do an erasure poem. It's really not very hard. Find something that you like to read, find some words that really call out to you for some reason, and then just erase everything that's around them. And you can come up with something that's completely new and different, and that's totally your own. It's always important to remember to give credit to wherever it came from, because without the original piece of writing, your poem wouldn't exist. So I hope you find the time to write lots of erasure poems over the coming weeks and months. It's a good opportunity to read, and it's a good opportunity to write and practice your creative thinking. Enjoy. Happy poetry writing.